All right. Good morning, everyone. I am Mark Cohn from Spirent and the moderator for this keynote panel discussion on the next wave of network innovation. Artificial intelligence and machine learning have permeated into every technology area. Deloitte recently concluded in their Global Artificial Intelligence Industry White Paper, published in 2019, that AI has been widely deployed in many verticals, including financial services, healthcare, and security, with many other industries soon to join. Closer to home, even my son is applying AI and ML in his field as a doctoral candidate in material science at Carnegie Mellon University. As the open networking movement gained momentum over the past decade, it was inevitable that AI and ML would emerge as essential toward attaining network automation. 8 or 9 years ago, the pioneers of SDN and NFV anticipated that AI and ML would soon be viable, and that day is just around the corner. So in this morning's keynote panel session, our expert panel will share their unique perspectives on the technology, operational, and cultural challenges and progress in anticipation of wide-scale AI ML adoption for telecommunications operations and management. Our panelists represent a broad cross-section of the industry, an analytics leader from the world's largest mobile operator group, the principal at one of the industry's most insightful analyst firms, who's currently assessing the role of AI in telecommunications, a cloud strategist from North America's largest mobile operator, who's also active in the open source and standards community, and an AI specialist representing an influential industry standards body. While this is a pre-recorded session, we encourage you to submit your questions through the event platform. And while all the panelists will not be able to take your questions live, we will respond within days following the session. So before getting started, I invite each of the panelists to offer a brief introduction. So Beatrice.
Hi, well, I'm going to say good afternoon because I'm based in Spain. So my name is Beatriz Roman. I prefer to call me Bea. I think is more familiar. And I'm the IoT team leader for the analytics, big data, and reporting area inside Vodafone Business, focused on IoT use cases.
Thank you. Beth?
And I'm Beth Cohen, reporting from North America, but I will be getting up at 4 o'clock in the morning so that I can join the actual questions. And I work on developing new products in the software-defined networking segment, responsible for several major products at Verizon. I'm also very active in the Edge open source community on the Open Infrastructure Working Group, as well as the LF networking standards body, working on infrastructure, defining infrastructure to support the software-defined networking uses.
All right, thank you. So Patrick?
Thanks, Mark. Patrick Kelly here, Principal Analyst with Appledore Research, and our firm focuses on disruptive technologies in the telecommunications sector. Some of those areas include Edge Cloud, Open RAN, and obviously the topic today, which is AI and machine learning.
Thank you. And Aaron?
Thank you, Mark. So I'm Aaron Bozeman Patel. I'm the Vice President of AI, Customer Experience and Data at TM Forum, and I lead all of our standardization and best practice work here at the forum in those areas.
All right, thank you. So our first question is addressed to all the panelists. So artificial intelligence is a pervasive global trend with the potential to disrupt and transform many industries, including our own. IDC projects that in 2021, spending on AI will reach $12 billion in Europe, with major growth expected over the next few years. So in order to frame today's discussion, I would appreciate if each of you can share the implications of AI and ML to your own organization. So we'll start with Beth.
So thank you, Mark. So AI ML is disruptive technology, and it's disruptive in the telecom industry. And specifically at Verizon, we're looking at it from to be used both internally within the core networks, particularly around the 5G space, which has much higher demands on the network, as well as developing products, customer-facing products that will incorporate those technologies and those to make the customer networks perform better. So we're pretty excited about it.
Great. Aaron, how about?
Yeah, I mean, for TM4, I mean, we're a leading industry association, and for us, we see it as a huge opportunity. It's massively exciting for the CSP and for the vendor landscape. You know, digital transformation is going to be worth over $400 billion, and really AI is going to be behind that, not only through cost savings, but actually really through driving, new revenues and business cases. And what's so exciting for us is actually, as we design new cloud native architectures, how does AI underpin all of that, and how can it, we really start to move to things to autonomous networks and how we get AI operations. So we're hugely, hugely excited because we see it sitting at the heart of digital transformation for telco.
Thank you. And Roman.
Yeah, or Patrick, who? Mark, should be me?
Yes, Roman, I was asking if you could share how Vodafone.
Well, yes, sorry, it's because you called me by my surname, so I was.
Oh, I'm sorry.
But yeah, no, so the implication on IoT is that we are focused on machine learning and artificial intelligence to improve our customer experience. So we are eager to help our customers to improve their services using the insights that we can provide to them. So that is the implication that we have right now in IoT.
Okay, great. Well, then it's interesting to see the cross section of interest. So our next question rather is going to be directed to our operators on the panel. So clearly AI and ML is considered essential in digital transformation. I think Aaron just pointed that out. And both Verizon and Vodafone have been among the early adopters of AI in the mobility network, and in which presumably will expand with the rollout as 5G, as Beth just mentioned. So can you both, what can you share about your organization's experience with AI and ML in the operational network to date? And what can your customers expect as AI and ML evolves over the next 24 months? Hard to predict beyond that. So Beatrice, do you want to start?
Okay, yeah, sure. Right now we have two initiatives. One is focused on AIOps. So our idea is to be able to detect anomalies and improve our services in real time for our IoT services. And the one that we have in our area is focused on customers, which we want to provide them also anomaly context detection insights for them to improve their services and forecasting. So the idea is to use the big data information that we recollect from CDRs and network and also business data, and through machine learning provide that insights to the customers that can be real time or not, or near real time, for them to allow them to take decisions on how they want to improve their IoT services. That is the two current initiatives that we are taking right now.
And are there customer implications? Can you comment on that a little bit?
At the end, I think that the big implication for the customer is that they will be able to save money through this decision. So if, for example, they are able to see that the SIMs that they are purchasing are not being used for the use that they want through the anomaly detection, they are going to be able to disconnect the SIM and not losing money. The typical scenarios, for example, the internet in the car. So you have a SIM in your car, and you need to be sure that it's being used for the purpose that is there. So that is, for example, the anomaly detection use case that will help us customers.
All right, thank you. And Beth, what can you comment on Verizon's experience with AI and ML and
So, we're just starting down that journey, but I'm going to talk about some of the issues that we're addressing. So there's a number of things. There's the need to tap into our data lakes, right? We, as a telco, and I'm sure Beatrice knows this as well, we have a lot of data about the network traffic and about our customers' usage of the networks. However, up until the rise of AI ML, which again, we're just starting on that journey, we haven't really been able to optimize the network based on that vast amount of information we have. And particularly mapping it to our customer requirements. I mean, we've been able to optimize the networks internally, but our customer requirements, and we're calling it intent-based networking. So think about, a customer wants certain applications to have better performance than others. And, we cannot read our customers' minds. So we need to get that information from the customer, then map it to our own data lake about how our network is performing, and then deliver to the customer the capability of optimizing those applications to meet their expectations. And that's the application, those are the services that we are developing moving forward. And that's focused on the enterprise customer and the business customers, rather than the consumer customer, which has a very, very different expectation.
And what do you think what's on the horizon? Is there a glimpse you can offer over the next 24 months of what's happening?
Well, I predict that there'll be some services that'll be coming out that are targeted at that customer, based on the work we're doing right now.
All right, thank you. And Patrick, Appledore Research is planning to release a market outlook report on AI and ML. I think it's by either the end of the month or next month, I believe, or something around that horizons. And as a result of your investigation and discussions with major operators and their vendors, what have you learned, and what have you been surprised by?
Yeah, that's right, Mark. So one of the things that we've been looking at Appledore Research is, in the context of AI, is the current state of the market. So we think it has tremendous potential to become a high-value tool used for specific tasks to support specific business problems, as presented by Beth, and some of the things that Verizon's looking at. So when we look at the market, we think it's important to look at AI in the context of the business problems and the results that you want to achieve, ultimately to yield faster, cheaper, and more accurate results than current workflow tasks that's typically used with traditional IT tools. So we think executives and implementers of AI, they need to look at their long-term strategy. They also need to look at the organizational impact of AI on existing jobs. Obviously, I think we're going to talk about this a little bit later, Mark. There's data privacy laws. And then probably lastly is you got to look at the economics of AI in improving decision-making for specific aspects of the business. So some of the areas in the research that we looked at where we think yields the highest investment in AI over the next 3-year period would be, for example, a 20-fold improvement in isolating faults and service impacting events, more accuracy in predicting demand of network capacity. This would be inclusive of the mobile network, and then better asset allocation for capital investments. So typically most operators, they'll actually build out their infrastructure. They actually overbuild the infrastructure. I think what AI does is it allows for more of a just-in-time model that supports some of these cloud models. Increases in customer retention, that's been long-standing in most operators' environments. We think AI can help there. Some other areas would be like reducing fraudulent transactions, and then improvements in personalized marketing campaigns. Those are probably further along than some of the operational areas that I mentioned earlier.
And is the adoption, I mean, how widespread is the adoption? I mean, are there early innovators who are driving this, or are we, where are we in the adoption curve for
Yeah, I
AI
think
and ML?
yeah, that's a good point, Mark. I think most so if we look at the commercial marketplace and suppliers that are fairly well established, there are robust offers that are being introduced in the marketplace. What we've seen from a research company is it's typically it's a services-led initiative. And what that allows the operator to do is work with their suppliers in defining the problem. And it's very much a tailored or customized approach. So if we look at things like I mentioned, accuracy and predicting demand for network capacity, that would be targeted at a specific area. It typically, when you look at a lot of operators, the tools that they use, and in some ways the way they've built their infrastructure is unique to the markets that they're serving, the customers they're serving. So we see a high level of services-led approach. And I think what will translate later on, as you sort of work those models out, you'll see more commercial, call it out of the box type solutions that can then be quickly tailored to the operator's environment. So that's principally what we're seeing right now. And I would call it early stage investment in machine learning and different AI methods.
That's consistent with, again, my sense of the market and what I've seen in other reports as well. So thank you. So Aaron,
can I add just a comment?
Sure,
about that?
Go ahead, Beth.
I'm doing work with the Linux Foundation and end user advisory group, which I think you're familiar with. Mm-hmm. And we recently did a survey of 65 operators and vendors on the, we were asking them actually fairly detailed questions about what they were doing and what state they were in. And the general consensus seems to be a fair amount of research and kicking the tires, not a whole lot of actual production activities yet. But quite a bit of it, obviously a high degree of interest. So that ties in with what Patrick was saying.
No, thank you for that data point. It's interesting to know with an actual survey. So I'm going to move on to Aaron. Aaron, TM Forum's also been considering AIOps actually for a number of years through the successful AI-based Catalyst multi-vendor proof of concept projects that have been underway. And based on the outcomes from those catalysts and related work, can you please share your thoughts on the role of standardization and open source and even open APIs in driving adoption for AIOps? And what suggestions can you offer to operators in the audience who are considering deployment?
Yeah, wow, that's quite a large question, but I'll give it a go and see where we get. Might have to remind me some of those points. But no, absolutely, AIOps is absolutely critical. I mean, this is going to be the enabler for AI, right? Unless we can operate it, it's not going to be successful. I mean, some results of those things, as you said, from the Catalyst, we saw some amazing results by deploying AIOps. We saw 25% reduction in customer complaints, 20% reduction in network faults, 25% increase in network availability, and even things such as 32% growth on OTT revenues, because these Catalyst projects have been deployed in real networks. I think that is the really interesting thing we're doing here at TM Forum, is that the Catalyst and proof of concept is actually going into live deployments, and then we're building the standards at the same time. Now that becomes really important because AI is new. It's not like traditional, technology where it's already running in your system and you can build a standard with it. Because this is so new, what you have to do is you have to look, how does it operate on a live network, and then start to build the standardization around real lifetime deployment. So that's the first really important thing I want to get through, is that all the standards we're building have been tried and tested, and it is in deployment. And I think one of the big changes is really understanding, well, how do you operate AI at scale? I think going back to what Becca was saying, a lot of deployments we've seen maybe have been, in some quite small niche areas. And now what we need to do is start to really open up, those deployments, really make sure it's more than one just network domain where we're deploying things like AI and automation and saying, how can it run across the whole CSP operation? The role then, of open standards becomes really, really critical. And that's what's so important with TM Forum. We work with all the standard organizations out there today, whether it's Linux Foundation, or whoever, GSMA, ETSI, we've all got to work together. APIs become absolutely critical as we migrate towards these open digital architectures, which are cloud native, data driven, using, APIs. We have to make sure that we have a standard that everybody can use. They can quickly adopt the architecture, and that is what becomes so important with open source. It's the idea that you can quickly adopt it, you can make changes for where it doesn't work, or maybe for your own systems, you need to make changes, because no one CSP system is the same. They don't look alike. And when you start to do things like deploy AI, that's actually a problem, because AI runs on very specific network patterns, on very specific data that comes through. So you've got to have that flexibility, and that's where open standards becomes important. And it's our role as industry associations to drive that openness. We shouldn't be putting boundaries or silos, because we're just, putting in problems. And then what we have to say is, okay, then you can adapt it for that maybe the last 20% into your networks. And that becomes critical. We have to now start deploying AI. We can no longer just say, oh, let's do it in our labs, because we're just going to get leapfrogged and the hyperscalers are just going to eat our lunch. So I'd say open source is so important. We've got to work together as an industry, and we have to look at how do all our various parts that we're working on fit together. And I think we all have our own domain expertise in areas that we can do, and that is what will drive success.
All right, thank you. And
Mark, I just wanted to add one thing to what Aaron had said, just from our perspective in talking to both operators and some of the suppliers. I think one of the key things that's critical to balance the cost of data acquisition with the accuracy of the business outcome. So if you look at applying AI for specific functions, the things that you'll need is you need training data to train the AI tool. You need input data to test and run the AI system. I think that being with Spirent. And then you need that feedback data that essentially improves the accuracy of the AI tool or the AI bot. So I think the context and the type of data will determine the value and its relevance in solving some of these, these use cases that we're talking about. So I think the thing about AI to put in context, I think for the audience, is it will be useful for some tasks, but it's not going to be relevant for all tasks. So I think you really need to look at applying AI for a limited data set, and when the problem is not well defined, you should pretty much avoid applying AI to that, because it results in a high set of failures. So I think it's important to look at the hype around AI, because there's a lot of excitement, and try and balance that with, okay, how do you move forward and get some real benefits in the use of machine learning?
Yeah, and just to comment on that though, Patrick, I think, Beat said something interesting before, and it's about, anomaly detection resolution. Well, that is a really good area, of where you can deploy it. We're very good at doing anomaly detection right now in telcos, but not actually the closed loop, resolution now. But that does require going across a bigger stratum than just, than just saying, oh, we'll deploy it in one small area of the business, because to be able to do that, truly, you've got to go across multiple partners, multiple vendors for that, even that one use case. So I do think though, when we talk about specific use cases, we have to understand rightly, okay, yes, what data we need, but open our minds and say there's actually bigger implications than just a silo to do that, because to do true anomaly detection resolution takes a lot of work. It has to span across, the whole network to do it correctly. So I think that becomes important.
And Aaron, let me pick up on that, and I'll give you an actual example. So a lot of systems have a lot of redundancy built into them, so they kind of cover up the faults. So for example, we might see a lot of like what we call in the industry flapping of circuits, but they're not actually going down because there's an HA system, right? So it's just switching back and forth between the routers. So we might see hundreds of these momentarily downs, but the operator, the NOC is going to look at it and say, well, from the customer's perspective, nothing's happening. So they're not motivated to close the ticket, or they're motivated to close the ticket and not look at the root cause that, wait, maybe there's something wrong if these things go on for literally days. Maybe there's actually a problem that's being covered up by the fact that we have redundant systems.
And I also want to add something on top of what Patrick says, that it's important to focus on machine learning, but at the end, if you don't have the data, it doesn't matter that you have a perfect algorithms that it's able to detect all the anomalies in your network if you're not able to access the data. So at the end, even machine learning needs to have a proper data lake, and there is also one of the challenge that we have, that more data implies more infrastructure for the storage, for the processing, and it's something that once an operator or any business area wants to start applying machine learning or artificial intelligence, they need to know that there will be implication in terms that they need to provide infrastructure, the capacities, the teams, the people that is able to perform the activities, to understand the data. And at the end, we need to change our mindset on how we work and what we need to be able to apply machine learning. People cannot say, okay, let's start to do machine learning tomorrow. No, you need to think carefully what is going to be all the implications and the investment that you will need to do in your organization.
Beatrice, I completely agree with everything you've said. And at TM Forum, the number one challenge we see when we talk to our members is getting access to that data. And that becomes the challenge. Data governance has now become, like chains around operators, because it's becomes, you can't have access to that data. I mean, there's challenges of, what data gets approved, how is it approved, what use case. Every time you want to make a small change to that use case, then you have to reapply for the data again. So one use case can go from 3 months, 6 months to 9 months before we even get to test it out. And we need, completely agree with what you've just said, a whole new approach and mindset to data governance, because without data, there's no machine learning, there's no AI, there's no deployment. And I couldn't agree more with what you said.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah, and I can tell you from experience.
Okay,
Yes.
thank you. We're going to move on. So then next, I want to get to a real fundamental issue, and that is, unlike many emerging technologies, there's been significant attention devoted and required because of the cultural and ethical implications of widespread deployment of AI ML, especially for verticals such as healthcare, financial services, and frequently in the news, law enforcement. Many national governments are exploring this area. The European Commission high-level expert group on AI is currently considering new regulations and guidelines, which will grow increasingly important as AIOps becomes the norm in a range of industries. And what I wanted to do is ask the panelists, all of you, please share the cultural implications in areas that your organization has been thinking about in your efforts to plan for AI and ML, and especially in the area of automated decision-making. And then also, how should the industry collaborate to address the cultural and ethical implications of in telecommunications in our industry? So I think, Beth, I'll start with you on that.
Well, that's a mouthful. So there are a lot of implications around AI ML, right? And it's not fully, it hasn't been fully worked through. And I'll give you an example. Many years ago, I worked in speech recognition. And at the time, speech recognition, this was back in the 1980s, speech recognition, they thought, oh, well, we'll just solve it with AI ML, right? We'll just, we'll just do some fancy algorithms, it'll all work. Well, the reality was that at the end of the day, what we needed was vast amounts of data, getting back to the data lakes, to create those wonderful speech recognition systems that we have. And it took a lot of work. And I don't see that this is going to be any different in the telecom industry. WAN networks is an incredibly complex problem. There's literally millions of nodes you need to keep track of, a lot of nuance. And, the reality is that we've been doing it kind of by the seat of our pants for a very, very long time. And there's a lot of people out there that have deep knowledge, but that's really hard to translate into machine learning and translate into something that can be used by a network without unintended consequences. So I think we are just starting down that path.
I think we got a dose of it when we started thinking about orchestration, where network automation started to come to the forefront, and then the thought about automatic decision making became a very critical trade-off for sure.
Well, and just to follow up on that, it spilled into it literally when we started doing those automations of our deployments, it then triggered a whole change in our operational model, right? The whole concept of software-defined networking and virtualization, spilled into, wait, we have to consider the hardware and the software separately. We need to redo all our alarming systems. So I think that AI ML is going to have a similar and even larger effect on the operational models.
So Patrick, do you want to comment?
Yeah, just pick up, Mark. Two things that I see with respect to AI in terms of the adoption hurdle. First one is it threatens job security. So that's the general consensus. Second thing is it can't be trusted. It's a black box. And I think one of the, as an industry, and we look at this, I think one of the things that we need to do to face those objections head on is thinking about where the AI system, and I say system because you have data collection, you have the algorithms, you got to do things like back propagation to improve the algorithm. You've got to have good visualization tools. So that's an AI-based system. Where the system can perform mundane tasks and free up human capital. I think that's one of the things as an industry we need to look at. And that basically allows you to take your experts and other human resources and apply them to other business problems. The AI is a black box. I think that belief is predicated on the fact that most operators, they don't know how the logic is executed, right? So if you have a supplier coming in and providing, I use the term black box, there's always suspicion that goes with that. So I think, around those, overcoming those objections, I think we take a stepwise approach. So you can allow the AI bot to run and then check the output. And then as confidence and the correctness improve, you can run it more in a semi-automated state. And then eventually you get the AI bot to run in a full closed loop automation. And I think those sort of stepwise functions is how we'll see this market mature, particularly as it pertains to the telco environment. Because again, some of the operators that we have on the panel today, they're in very large organizations. They have a lot of skilled resources. I'm sure you're seeing that in your own organizations, and it's really tackling those two problems and really trying to get some positive benefit out of the use of AI and machine learning.
And I'd just like to follow Patrick up on that, because at the forum, we're doing a huge amount of work in that area of explainability. And I think that's a really important thing as an industry to understand. So, we have to be able to explain AI. It's going to become a regulatory requirement. The regulators will come down hard, if you can't. So, we started to design lots of things to give people confidence so you can actually safely, and securely deploy AI and at scale. And that is the critical part. So, we develop things such as AI checklists, which goes right across the organization, right across the software lifecycle from procurement to end of life. So that's to make sure that, we can upskill people so they can download the checklist, that, they're machine readable. So you can make sure right the way across the lifecycle that you're doing all the things you need to do. We've designed an industry standard AI model data sheet, so that when your AI is running onto your system, the data is being collected in real time, so you can understand, what the data is, what was the purpose of the model. All of these things are being collected in real time, so you can see, what were the data sets that were used, when was it last updated, when does it need to be updated. All of those conditions are so important. And then, Mark, back to the other thing you're doing again about the safe governance. We've also, designed some open APIs, and we've called it, the AI governance API. So that actually, when you deploy AI onto your system, you can use those APIs to really understand what is happening in real time. So, what conditions must remain, satisfied for that correct operation, what expected operational boundaries and the thresholds, and what actions need to be triggered in the event of a rule being triggered. So we've developed the open APIs to do that. We allow the operator to set all those operational boundaries and what actions need to be taken. But we are making huge, as an industry, progress in being able to allow people to upskill, but also to manage AI at scale, and explainability, because explainability is an essential part of being able to deploy AI. And no government, no regulator in the world will allow you to do it unless you can satisfy those conditions. And as an industry, I have to say, we're working hard on that, and we've got a number of standards at TM Forum to enable it.
And I could just observe from what you're explaining, all of you, that we need to think about how do we validate this new technology area moving ahead as we incrementally admit new technologies that have widespread implications into the network. So just another angle to think about among many. Okay, now since we covered the easy areas, now we want to get to one of the most challenging areas, and AI is being thought of from a number of different perspectives. So recent operator surveys that indicate that improving security is a key driver motivating enterprise customers to opt for managed services, and managed security services in particular. And that's versus attempting to try to operationalize new software-driven services on their own. And security vendors are beginning to embrace AI and ML into their platforms, or at least they claim they do. And I wanted to understand from the panel, what is your pragmatic assessment of the role that AI and ML is playing in enhancing network security, and what are the risks that you see? So Patrick, why don't we start there?
Yeah. All good points, Mark. I just go back, I try and look at things and simplify it. When you think about AI, what it is you have a huge data set. We've talked about data lakes. It's looking for pattern recognition. And again, I always go back to experts can do it, but if you can have a machine and you've got the right algorithms tuned to that data, it does it faster, cheaper, more economically than any human being can do. So we kind of look at security in the context, like if I apply things like fraudulent transactions, or you look at any sort of threat detection, those are just data patterns, right? That you can kind of run through the machine to help. I think where we get into the slippery slope with respect to security is, as you start to pull more data, whether you're applying it to the network infrastructure or to some aspect of a security perimeter, you have to look at things like data privacy. So what data is being collected? And it kind of goes back to some of the points that Aaron was making, that is around governance and regulation, right? So in Europe, you have General Data Protection Regulation that got passed in 2018. You have to put some parameters around being able to harness the power of AI and machine learning, but at the same time protect sensitive data, both in the customer domain, but there's also, other areas. So, you've got things like third parties, right? The ecosystem that we're operating in, many telcos are operating in, is, there's partnerships with a lot of other service providers downstream, and it's being able to, effectively govern, how that data gets utilized, at the same time, anonymizing that data so you're not jeopardizing privacy privacy laws or any sort of regulation that might be in place.
Yep. Yeah. I can add you some things, because one of the main issues that and challenges that we have faced in IoT in the platform that we are developing for analytics based on machine learning, it's about the GDPR legacy. So how we need to anonymize the data, and how we are able to provide to the machine learning algorithms to access that data, because an algorithm needs the real data to be trained. You cannot tell the data scientists that they need to train their algorithms with test data, because it's not going to work. So we need to provide them access to that data in an anonymized way. And it has been one of the challenges, because of in our case, our security department is quite pushing on that aspect. And one of the things that we are doing is, for example, we are storing in transit the anonymized data in the data lake. So the algorithms and the teams are always being able to access the anonymized data. And then apart on the curation process of that data, we are ensuring that if there is any customer that doesn't allow us to access their data, because at the end is private data for our customers, we filter that customer. So we ensure that customers are not being used for training any algorithms if they don't allow us. But as I'm saying, this all starting in the data lake, and if we start storing the data anonymized, we are solving one issue from the beginning.
Yeah. Let me add to that. So one of the things that is now, in the U.S. and I'm sure in the world is robocalls and vSpam, and that's becoming a bigger and bigger problem. And so we have been applying those algorithms to stop those robocalls, and we're deploying shaken, not stirred out in the network, and I know other telecoms are doing that as well. What's interesting is that, as soon as we detect a pattern, the bad guys seem to figure out a way to get around that pattern. So it's a war.
And Beth, the security problem is similar. I mean, think about, we're looking for things, we don't know what they look like. We're looking for anomalies, but anomalies are part of life. I mean, this is sort of what the line of thinking I had in, at least for proposing the question. Aaron, do you have any additional thoughts on how security, AI and ML can address security?
Yeah, I mean, it's important. I think, I think a lot of the points have already been said. I think the anomaly detection, I think is the most critical thing. I mean, one thing we've looked at here at TM Forum is security violation detection resolution for network functions, and that was the first, place that we've looked at it. So, I think it's got a huge role to play. I think, you've also got to secure your AI, and you've also, and you can also open yourself up to, to more challenges with security. But that's really because of virtualization, is going to enable that. So, it's all going to be security by design. I think in everything that we start to build, I think AI machine learning has got a really important role to play. That is going to be anomaly detection resolution. You'll play anyway. Banking have done it for years and years. They've looked a lot at it. I think they've been quite advanced in a number of these areas. I think Beth gives some really good examples there, what they're doing with the robocalls, and I think, hacking is going to increase. I think we all know that. So I think if we can really understand, where we can apply AI machine learning to help maybe do some of that detection around anomalies is going to be really, really critical, because fundamentally, as we do virtualize all of our systems, we increase our risk hugely. And we need to understand that. We need to embrace it, if you like, and we need to do all security by design. So I think everyone else has said pretty much the same.
Well, it's interesting because when I asked the question, I didn't really think about the privacy consideration, but security and privacy go hand in hand. So it's interesting that that's an area that you're thinking about, all of you are thinking about, and is going to be something that's going to have to be addressed on a regional basis, because there are no single regulations, and also regulations always lag behind technology. So now that we have a few more minutes left. So as we're wrapping up, I just wanted to give everybody an opportunity to raise any issues or thoughts you might have that we didn't talk about in the panel discussion. So Beatrice, do you want to maybe chime in? And
Yeah. So just a couple of things that I think it's important on IAP and machine learning is two things that we need to embrace the DevOps and CI/CD model to be able to deliver a proper machine learning and artificial intelligence in the future, because the things are changing constantly and we need to be open in working in agile, because we cannot follow a release approach on this type of new developments. And the second is that we need also to change the way that we think about the cloud. So there are two things: the way that we work in agile, and to have a product as a service or a public cloud in place that allow us to be to reduce the risk to embrace these new technologies. Because sometimes when you think about start machine learning, it's like, okay, what about investment? If we go to a cloud, we are reducing that risks.
Aaron, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to this, I'd like to just go back to a couple of points that we've already done, just to show the importance. So I think data, we have to sort that out. And I want to go back to saying, as an industry, we have to work together at TM Forum. We're coming up with what we call, a data governance framework to try and help with that. And it's obviously got to be quite fluid, as you rightly said, Mark. There's regulations in all different countries and different areas which are different. So we need though to have a common data framework so we can understand, how we can make those changes and make data more available and quicker. I think we have to start deploying now, whether it's starting small and then looking, we can't wait for everything to be perfect. I think that becomes important. I think in telecoms, going back to what Beatrice said, it's a mindset change. Everything can't be perfect. We've got to, really start to deploy it, to try it, to test it out, change that mindset. And I think those things become important. And if you do that as an industry, though, we have to work together. You'll always have your secret sauce, those extra bits that, that get you those extra customers, that drives that revenue. But fundamentally, with 5G, we know what the use cases are. We know what we need to do on those common areas, that common infrastructure. We have to work together, because the one thing that telecoms have is amazing amount of data about their customers, more than anybody else in the world. They also have scalability. Those two key things that we need for AI machine learning and to digitally transform: scalability and data. And I think we need to be a bit more positive and not be so hard on ourselves. We need to say, let's try it, let's change, and let's see where we get. And, and I'd like to say, I welcome any standards organization to come and work with TM Forum, any operator, any vendor. Come on, we've got to all work together. We've got to be open. We've got to solve these challenges, and let's do it together, and let's have fun while we're trying to do it, because, life's far too sad without enjoying what we do.
Thank you. And Patrick.
If Mark, I'd just pick up on what Beatrice was saying around CI/CD, because I think she picked up on an important point, and that is, if we take a look at the next set of technologies, they're far more sophisticated. If you look at 5G, right, you got a 50-fold increase in complexity. The way we're doing things now just is not going to work with the sophistication and the level of complexity of these new technologies that get deployed and the services that run over that. And I think, this is where you can actually, we talked about intent-based networking and closed loop automation. AI basically becomes the intelligence, if you will, that drives a lot of those processes, those workflow processes. And I think, that's where the industry, it almost becomes a forcing function. The industry needs to sort of look at, how do you embrace, get over some of these cultural issues that we're talking about, embrace where AI can make sense. Again, it's not going to be broad brush. It'll only work in specific areas, but where you can get some of those efficiency gains, particularly where you're dealing with complex technology, I think that's the right fit for AI. And again, we're moving into more of these cloud-based delivery models. Very dynamic. Workloads are moving around. You got Lambda services that'll show up for a few seconds. How do you keep pace with all these changes? You can't do it the old way. You have to move forward. And I think AI, it's a tool in the toolbox that allows us to sort of deliver on these new services over these highly, highly complex technologies.
Oh, that excellent point. A rate of change in software-driven services and networks has always been a huge challenge, and AI is going to be relied upon to be able to address that. And as our time winds down, Beth, how about the last word, the last few words?
Oh, thank you. So I have two things. I think we don't know what we don't know. And I think that's an important thing to remember as we go through an automation revolution. So the telecoms have been highly automated for a long time. I mean, we support millions of users and millions of endpoints, but we are going through a transformational revolution in how we manage it, and it's going to be automation at a different scale and a different way. We literally don't know where it's going, and I'm pretty excited about that.
All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for an interesting and thought-provoking panel discussion on an area that I think we're going to be hearing quite a bit more about in the years to come. I also wanted to thank our audience for joining us for this panel discussion. And also we want to invite everyone to share your questions through the platform. Layer123 will be providing additional details on how we can respond. We do have during the live session that's going on right now, afterwards, we're going to be some of the panelists will be joining. Other panelists will not be able to join. We want to apologize in advance for that. I also wanted to have everyone enjoy the rest of the Europe 360 Network Automation Congress. And we hope to see everybody next year, only this time in person. So thank you very much.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you all. That was a really great panel. I really appreciate it.